Good morning, everyone. Before we start, let's take the first poll. Just want to ensure all of you are able to hear me and we have no issues with the sound. All right, so it looks like all of you are able to hear me. So let's get started off. Thank you everyone for joining into today's session on Dynamics CRM Custom Actions, brought to you by CRM 187. My name is Shashank, and I'm a Dynamics CRM consultant and trainer at CRM 187. I have previously worked with Microsoft as a CRM consultant and have been working on CRM from version 3.0. I would encourage you to take a look at some of our new offerings on crm187.com and get in touch with us if you're interested. Also, just feel free to drop in questions throughout the presentation. I will check regularly and take them up through the session, and you will be receiving a link to the recording of the session by the end of this week. So let's get started and have a look at the agenda for today. In today's webinar, first we will see the different processes that are available in Dynamics CRM for automation. Then we'll go ahead and cover custom actions in detail. We will go ahead and create a couple of custom actions and see how to execute them from within the application, and also using the SDK if time permits. So let's get right into it. So in Dynamics CRM, there are essentially four kinds of processes that help you automate business logic. The first one are actions. Now, actions open up a range of possibilities for composing business logic, and as we go through the session, we'll actually look at how you can use them. The next one are business process flows. Now, business process flows provide a guide for people to get work done. With business process flows, you can define a set of stages and steps that are then displayed in a control at the top of the form. People advance to the next stage by using the next stage button. You can make a step required so that people must enter data for the corresponding field before they can proceed to the next stage. Typically, business process flows are used in scenarios such as sales process and case resolution process. Next, we have dialogues. Now, dialogues display the input forms and the data that a user needs at each step while interacting with a customer, or let's say while following a complex procedure. Now, a dialogue can have branching logic that is based on input from the person stepping through the case, phone call, or other customer interaction. Now, it's typically used in call centers to provide scripts that allow customer-facing staff to capture data in a streamlined manner. What it does is it gives users a kind of a wizard-driven user interface to perform complex procedures in a consistent manner. And the last one that we have are workflows. Now, workflows help automate business processes without a user interface, and what it essentially does is it helps you perform certain actions based on certain triggers that you would have defined. So let's look at custom actions in detail. Now, I know custom actions aren't totally new in CRM. They were released in 2013, but I do get a lot of questions on what are they, how do they work, why would I use them, how would I trigger them. Now, before custom actions, the primary way to implement business process was limited to plugins or custom workflow activities. Now, with actions, you can perform operations such as create, update, delete, assign, or perform action. And you can even create your own actions such as, let's say, escalate, convert, schedule, approve, whatever kind of action that you need. Now, the nice thing about custom actions is you can create business logic directly from within the platform as opposed to going ahead and creating a plugin. Now, once an action is created, developers can create code that is executed from within this custom action. Now, with 2015, Microsoft gave the option of executing custom actions directly from within the application. Prior to 2015, with 2013, you could create custom actions, but it had to be executed outside the application. But with 2015, you can execute them through workflows or dialogues from within the application itself. So let's have a look at our first demo for today. And here what we'll do is we'll see a typical example of creating an approval action. So in this example, let's consider a scenario where a sales representative is creating an opportunity or updating an opportunity and has to give more than 20% discount on the opportunity. Now, in such a scenario, let's say he or she requires the manager approval. So let's jump to the application. So in the CRM application, we go into settings, and under the process center, we have processes. Now let's go ahead and hit on the new button. And let's give the process name as approval process. Now the category of this process, again, like we discussed in the slide deck, there are 4 kinds of processes: action, business process flow, dialogues, and workflows. Now here what we want to do is we want to create an approval action. And then let's go ahead and choose an entity with which we want to associate this action. So if you drop down the entity, you'll see that actions can be associated with different entities, or you can also go ahead and create a global action. Now, the nice thing about this is a global action can be used or transferred between different entities. Now here, we know that we'll be updating the opportunity entity, so let's go ahead and choose that. And then let's say OK. So this is where you'll configure the action. Let's go through each one of these options that we have. The first one is a process name that we just defined. A unique name is automatically generated by Dynamics CRM. Then we have the option to activate this either as a process or as a process template. Let's say you want to create this as a template and reuse it to create actions in future. You could do that. Now here we're going to activate this as a process. And on the right side, you'll see the entity this action is associated with, the categories action. And then what we want to do is we want to enable rollback. What this means is generally when rollback is enabled, it will undo or roll back the entire operation if any part of it fails. And the next thing that we have here is the option to define input or output arguments. Now let me try to explain what these are. Now, when a developer uses an action, they may begin with some data that they can pass into the action. For example, let's say to create a new case record, there might be the case title value that is passed as an input argument. Now, when it comes to output argument, let's say when the action is finished, the developer may need to pass some data that was changed or generated by the message to another operation in their code. That data is the output argument. Now, as we go through this session, you will get a better understanding of how the arguments work in context of the entire action. So in this example, let's go ahead and create an input argument and call it special notes. And the type that we want to pass is string. We want to make the direction as an input argument, and let's leave the description blank. Now, once we have defined this argument, let's go ahead and add steps that are required to be performed. So what we want to happen is if the opportunity discount percent is more than 20%, we want an email triggered to the manager of the person who's creating or updating the opportunity. So let's go ahead and add a step. And let's choose send email option. So let's type in the description here, approval email, and let's set the properties for this email. So we want to trigger this email from the owner of the opportunity. And let's say we also want to CC the owner so that he or she knows that the email has been triggered. And we want to send it to the manager of the owner of the opportunity. So let's type in a subject line there. Please approve the following opportunity. And let's also type in the body of the email. please review the following opportunity and approve or provide feedback as needed. Now, to make it easy for the manager to approve, let's go ahead and put in the hyperlink to the opportunity as well so that they can just click on it and go ahead and approve as needed. So we're going to put in a dynamic URL there. So let's put in the text as opportunity to approve. And the URL will be the URL of the opportunity. And we'll also pass the input parameter that we defined, which is the special notes. And let's go ahead and put in the signature, which is the full name of the opportunity owner. And let's define the duration as 1 minute. And save and close this. So now we have created our action. What we want to do is we want to go ahead and trigger this action. Now there are different ways of triggering this action. You could do it through a code within the plugin that you configure. You could use web services or JavaScript. But here we'll go ahead and run it from the application itself. So let's configure a workflow to invoke this particular action. Now before we do that, let's save and activate this particular action. So now that we have created our approval action, let's go ahead and create the workflow to invoke the action. So let's call this require approval email. And here we're going to choose the category as workflow. And as you see in workflow, you don't have the option to associate it with global entities like you did with actions. So we're going to choose the opportunity entity. So again, we have the process name. We have the option to activate it as a process or a process template. And then we have the scope. We'll set it to user. And the trigger points. So we want this workflow to kick in when the record is created or when the discount percent on the opportunity changes. So let's go ahead and choose that option, which is the opportunity discount percentage. And we're going to click on this row and add a step where we're going to first check if the discount percent on the opportunity is greater than 20%. And then let's go ahead and configure our condition. So we're going to choose opportunity. We're going to choose the discount percentage is greater than, and then we're going to say 20%. Now once that's defined, what we want to do is we want to run the action we created. So I'm going to go ahead and say add step and perform action. And let's call this must be approved. And we're going to select the approval process action that we created and set the properties of that. Now here, if you remember, we defined the input argument. What we want to do is, let's say we want to send the account name that the opportunity is associated with in the email to the manager as well. So we can go ahead and associate the special notes parameter with the account. And also the target would be the opportunity. So once this is defined, let's save and activate this. So now we have both the action, the approval process, and the workflow to invoke that action, which is require approval email. So let's go ahead and test this out. So just want to point out at this time that the user I've logged in as is CRM187, and the manager for this user is test user. So if I go ahead and create an opportunity now, and if the discount is more than 20%, an email should be triggered to test user. So let's go ahead and check that. So I go into sales, go to opportunities, and here let's go ahead and create a new opportunity. So let's give the topic as opportunity to sell product ABC, and let's associate it with, let's say, the Adventure Works account, and let's also put in the opportunity discount as 30%. What I've also done is on another browser, I have the mailbox of the test user who's the manager of CRM187. So let's give it a few seconds and we should see the email coming in requesting for approval. So there you go. The email has just come in. And if we open that email up, it says, please review the following opportunity. And it has a link to the opportunity since we put in the dynamic URL there. And using the input parameter special notes, we also pass the name of the account so that the manager knows which account this opportunity is associated with. So let's look at a second demo where we'll be creating the update action, and we'll be working with something called the preferred customer program. Now, to get a better understanding, let me show you the modified account form that I have. So in the application, I'll go under settings, go to customizations, customize the system, and under the entities, I'll go to the forms of the account entity. And here I've created a new form. So if you have a look at this form, I have created a new section called the Preferred Customer Program. Now there are three things that we'll be checking for to know whether an account is a preferred customer or not: the credit limit, the credit hold, and the relationship type. And the logic that we are going to use to know whether an account is a preferred customer is first we're going to check credit hold. If a credit hold exists on the account, then they're not a preferred customer. The second thing is if there's no credit hold and the credit limit is greater than $10,000 and the relationship type is that of a customer, then we'll make the account a preferred customer. And the third thing that we're going to check is, irrespective of the credit limit, if the relationship type is that of a partner, then we'll automatically make the account a preferred customer. So let's go ahead and see how to define this logic by creating the action. So again, we go under settings, we go to processes. Let's go ahead and create a new process. And we'll call this the preferred customer. And we'll define the category as an action. And in this example, let's go ahead and make this a global action. So again, we have the process name and the unique name generated from CRM. And then we have the entity as global and the category as action. Now here we're going to define the input and output arguments that we want. So we'll define three input arguments, which are the credit hold. And that's going to be a Boolean, a yes or no. And I'll make that a required argument. And let me leave the description as blank. The second one that we want to define is a credit limit. And since this is a monetary value, I'll choose money as a type. And the third input argument that we want to define is the relationship type. And let me define this as a string. And finally, let's go ahead and define an output argument, which is the preferred customer. Again, this will be a Boolean, and let's change the direction. So now that we've defined our input and output arguments, let's go ahead and add the steps that are required for this action. So the first thing that we want to check, according to the logic that we defined, is whether a credit hold exists or not. So I go ahead and say add step and add the check condition. So check credit hold, and let's configure that condition. So here you'll only see the local values since it's a global action. And we're going to say if credit hold equals 1. What we want to do now is we want to assign the value for the preferred customer. I'm going to set that as not preferred since the credit hold exists. Go into properties. And by default, I've already set it as false, so I'm going to leave it at that. And then I'm going to go ahead and complete out the rest of the logic. Just from a time perspective, I'm going to open up an action where the logic is already being defined. So here we have the entire logic defined, where first we're checking if the credit hold exists, then we're setting the account as not preferred. And then if the credit limit is over $10,000 and the relationship type is 3, which is essentially a customer, then we're setting the account as a preferred customer. And the third thing that we're checking is if the relationship type is that of a partner, then set it as a preferred customer. If not, the default action, we're setting it as not preferred. Now again, we've created the action, but we need to create a workflow to invoke this action. So let's go ahead and quickly do that. So I'm going to say new, call this update preferred customer, and choose the category as workflow and the entity as the account entity. Now a few changes here. Let's make the scope as organization, and the trigger points is 1, when the record is created, and 2, when either of the 3 fields that we're checking, credit limit, credit hold, or the relationship type change. So let's go ahead and choose those. And let's also convert this to a real-time workflow. And we're going to go ahead and say add step and perform the action that we've defined. And go on our set properties. Now here's where we'll go ahead and map the arguments that we have defined to the fields in the entity. So the credit hold, next the credit limit, let's map it to the credit limit in the account. And finally we have the relationship type. Now once that's defined, we need to perform an action which is updating the preferred customer field of the account. So the final step would be to update the record and go to set properties. And here we want to bring in the preferred customer argument that we've defined. So I'm going to look for the local value, which is the preferred customer, and do a save and close. So again, let's activate this workflow and go ahead and test out if this works. So I'll go to accounts, go to a particular account. And let's say we go ahead and change the credit hold to yes. And let's just give it a few seconds. And you'll see automatically that the preferred customer becomes no since the credit hold exists. So we saw a couple of demos. First one was creating the approval action, and the second one was creating the update action. And it looks like I have a couple of questions that have come up. So the first question is, can you not configure these directly in the workflow? So workflow processes and plugins continue to provide similar capabilities for defining automation. Workflows still provide the capability for a non-developer to apply changes, but the difference is in how the business processes are composed and how a developer can write their code. Now, generally, an action is a message that operates on the same level as any of the actions provided by the CRM platform, and then developers can register plugins for those actions. So in short, yes, you could achieve these through the workflows, but you could also create these as separate actions, separate out the business logic, and then either call it from a workflow or from the code that you design through the plugin. Another question that has come up is if we're going to share the recording. Yes, you will be receiving the recording post the session. And that brings us to the end of the session. We saw, what custom actions were and how you can configure and run them. A couple of things before we wrap up. Let me just bring up a couple of polls. How would you rate the overall quality of the session? So your feedback is important to us. All right, and the final poll for the day is, would you be interested in similar upcoming sessions? Perfect. Also, again, I encourage you to check out crm187.com site and sign up for the upcoming trainings. We will have new webinars listed by the end of this week. Feel free to sign up for them. Also, as a follow-up, I will be sending across the recording. Feel free to write to us at training@crm187.com if you have any queries. Thank you all for attending today's session and have a great day ahead.